The Aristotle on your bookshelf is a heavily engineered construct, a version of the text swallowed by centuries of competing agendas. The core of this construct is the lemma. A lemma is a short quotation from an original text, excerpted specifically for analysis. While modern readers often view these analyses as passive footnotes, ancient commentators use them differently. A 10-word lemma served as the structural excuse to generate a 500-word original philosophical thesis. This process ensured the survival of Western logic. Successive generations of thinkers re-engineered Aristotle's treatises to fit their own intellectual frameworks. This literary technology operated continuously for 600 years, from the 1st century BCE through late antiquity. This mechanism eventually enabled a hostile ideological takeover, warping foundational texts like the De Anima, Aristotle's treatise on the soul. Grounded. To understand ancient philosophy, we must stop looking exclusively at the master and start decoding the architectural matrix built by his commentators. By the 1st century BCE, Aristotle's works had been largely ignored for hundreds of years. The physical ruins of his school, the Lyceum in Athens, mirrored the state of his philosophy. A scramble began to recover and organize his surviving manuscripts. These were esoteric, complex treatises, never intended for public circulation. This fragmented papyrus shows why editors like Andronicus of Rhodes had to impose order on a chaotic body of work. The material degradation forced heavy editorial intervention just to make the text readable. Andronicus made a pivotal structural decision. He placed a short, obscure text called the Categories at the very beginning of his new comprehensive catalog. This placement triggered an immediate backlash. Stoic philosophers argued the Categories was merely an incomplete treatise on language and linguistic expressions. Early commentators like Boethus of Sidon defended the text, cementing the Categories as the foundational introduction to all Aristotelian logic. Strategic placement transformed an obscure work into the mandatory gateway for all future philosophical education. In the 2nd century CE, Roman imperial power established public, salaried chairs of philosophy in Athens to formalize the teachings of the major schools. Alexander of Aphrodisias held the imperial chair of Aristotelian philosophy. His primary job was the public defense of the school against competing systems. The Peripatetics were the direct followers of Aristotle's school, named for the covered walkways, or peripatus, where they held their discussions. Alexander operated under a strict constraint. He sought absolute internal consistency, using Aristotle's own principles to resolve Aristotle's blind spots. He selectively ignored works that did not serve this systematizing agenda, producing a curated version of the philosophy. This rigor earned him the title of the most authentic interpreter in antiquity. Alexander represents the peak and the end of the closed-loop peripatetic tradition. He fortified the fortress just before it was conquered from the outside. By late antiquity, the intellectual landscape shifted. The commentators were no longer Aristotelians, but fiercely committed Platonists. Figures like Porphyry and Simplicius believed the two systems were in a state of deep, underlying harmony. This chart shows the new Neoplatonic curriculum ladder. Aristotle's works on logic, ethics, and physics were stripped of their ultimate authority and placed at the base of the structure. These Aristotelian subjects became a prerequisite, mastered only to reach the true goal, Platonic theology. Forcing this structural agreement required a massive volume of commentary, rewriting Aristotelian concepts to fit the Platonic mold. This effort generated physical artifacts of assimilation. For instance, Porphyry's commentary on the Categories survives as the ghostly undertext of the Archimedes palimpsest, enduring beneath centuries of later writing. The Neoplatonists subjugated Aristotle's life's work, ensuring its survival only as a mandatory stepping stone for their own theology. This curriculum design created a massive blind spot, the abandonment of what we now call biology. Empirical biology offered no help in ascending to divine Platonic theology. Without that utility, commentaries on Aristotle's biological works ceased to exist. This omission severed the De Anima, Aristotle's treatise on the soul, from its intended context as a study of earthly organisms. This diagram shows the original science as three connected nodes: biology, deonyma, and theology. Severing biology created a puzzle around the active intellect, the part of the mind Aristotle described as separate. Divorced from biology, commentators speculated on what this intellect actually was. Alexander argued the intellect was an external god, while Themistius argued it was the immortal essence of the human soul. By practicing physics without biology, the ancient commentators turned an empirical scientific text into a theological puzzle that still colors modern psychology. In the 6th century CE, the Latin tradition faced an urgent need for translations, as Greek fluency faded in the West. This introduces Boethius, the transmitter of this accumulated architectural weight. Boethius set out to translate and comment on the entirety of Plato and Aristotle, attempting to prove a state of absolute structural agreement between the two. This chart shows the curriculum flowchart translating into Latin. Boethius translated the Organon, the collection of Aristotle's logical works, baking the Neoplatonic framework into the foundation of the early Middle Ages. He wrote double commentaries, basic and advanced versions, ensuring this framework reached every level of medieval education. The commentary tradition was a 600-year effort to close the gap between Aristotle's elusive intentions and the ideological demands of subsequent eras. The medieval and modern worlds inherited a heavily engineered operating system, a version of Aristotle built by 600 years of stealth philosophers, far removed from the empirical scientist of the Lyceum.